Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee. I'm Ewan Walters, Senior Democratic Services Officer. The first item on the agenda is appointment of chairman, and Mr. Barclay was nominated as chairman-elect at the County Council meeting on the 17th of May. So can I have a proposer and seconder, please, that Mr. Barclay be appointed as chairman?
Would be delighted to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Bill. Okay, everybody happy with that? Thank you very much. So, Mr. Barclay, I'll hand over to you for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. So, welcome to today's meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee, which is taking place at County Hall in Glenfield, though some officers will be joining online via Microsoft Teams. I'd just like to remind everyone that present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the election of the Vice Chairman, and I would like to propose Mr. Richardson, if I could have a... Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That's that issue on this. So next, can I propose that the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of March 2023 are taken as read, confirmed and signed? Is that agreed? Yep. Thank you. Question time. No questions are received from the public. Questions asked by members under Standing Order 7. I have received no questions. Urgent items. I have one urgent item for consideration, which is a report from the Director of Law and Governance titled Dispensation for Non-Attendance. This report is urgent as the member concerned, if they are unable to attend full council in July, will automatically cease to be an elected member of the council. This committee does not meet again until after July council, so the request must be considered today. I will take this matter as a final item on the agenda at item 17. So the next item is declaration of interest. Do any members have any declaration they wish to make in respect of any items on the agenda today? Mr. Richardson.
A usual declaration, Mr. Chairman, as a Lloyds Bank pensioner.
Thank you. We have received no petitions. The next item is the external audit plan for 2022-23. Nick Walsh, Head of Finance, will introduce this item before handing over to Mary Wren from Grant Thornton. Welcome to the meeting, Mary. So, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report focuses on the external audit plan and risk assessment for 2022-23. The plan talks through the scope of the timing of the work to be done in relation to the statutory audit for the last financial year. And obviously it's done in line with the code of practice issued by the National Audit Office and the Accounts and Audit Amendment Regulations. I'm only going to give a very brief overview. Mary Wren, the senior audit partner, as you've already introduced, will give the detail in a moment. She'll also go through the risk assessment, sort of a list of questions that have been prepared together with the responses that we've put together. The Grant Thornton will use these to assess the understanding of management processes and oversight of this committee in relation to key aspects of the council's financial operations. The proposed main fee for the audit is £128,815. That compares to £139,777 for last year, and for the that's for the county council, and then for the pension fund, £36,793 compared to £33,193 last year. Just briefly, I'll refer members to the accounts timetable, the section starting at paragraph 14. The draft accounts are expected to be completed by the end of June, as we had planned. The government have since announced a reversion to the pre-COVID timelines of the end of May. However, for the reasons outlined in paragraph 15, and not least the lateness of the announcement, this will not be possible. A note will be placed on the council's website to this effect. It's worth reflecting that there's quite a lot of commentary on this in the local government press at the moment, and it's clear that most local authorities will struggle with publication by May. The deadline for audit accounts remains at the 30th of November, But as you know, that wasn't achieved last year, and the wider capacity issues in the external audit market mean I suspect that it's unlikely to have achieved this year as well. But I'll now hand over to Mary to go through the detail.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick, and it's lovely to meet everyone for my first committee. Just as a little bit of background, I'm a senior manager with Grant Thornton. I'm the new but certainly not improved Andy Reid, and I've worked with Mark Stocks for a long time. So as Nick introduced, so if I take you through the council plan first. So this document does set out our audit for the 22-23 year, but it is something that isn't fixed. If new risks do arise, we consider those in the context of whether we need to do any further audit procedures on them, and those would be reported through to this committee. So this is a document that is under constant review. I will take the report as read, and obviously happy to take questions on it, but there are 3 key areas that I'd just like to talk through. The first area relates to the significant risks that we identify, and they're on page 7 of our report. These risks do take a significant amount of our audit time. They generally involve high use of estimation. There's uncertainty around those estimates, and they are quite complex values, and obviously significant in terms of the monetary value within the financial statements. The first risk, which is considered in every audit plan, in every audit, is management override of controls. That is a risk that we cannot rebut. So we do specific procedures around journals in particular on that. And that is something that will appear in every audit plan. The second risk, which I'll take you through on page 8, is around the valuation of land and buildings. This is one of those areas alongside the pension fund net liability, which is subject to a high degree of estimation, complexity and involvement of external experts as well. So we do spend a significant amount of time in the audit on those areas. If I could just take you through to page 17, our work on the audit is within the context of materiality, and for the current financial year, your materiality has been set at £14.5 million, which is a percentage of your gross expenditure. We do have to report all non-trivial matters through this committee, and that has been set at £700,000, which is consistent with prior year. The last item I'd just like to mention is the change to ISA 315, and this is around the work that we have to do under that revised ISA in relation to the understanding of you as an organisation, and in particular around the IT environment. So we do actually do much more work around that this year, and we're working with the council to go through that. I wasn't going to go into any more detail, but I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mary. So we have a question. Mr. Walter.
On page 8 of our report, it says it's going to be an additional fee for the work you're doing, but it didn't say how much that was going to be. Could you just tell us how much it would, please?
Sorry, I missed the page number.
Page 8 on our report.
I think it's page 8 of the overall pack, not your individual.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Sorry, thank you.
40.7.
So the proposed fee for the audit, sorry, is that on?
No, it's the extra work you're doing. It says that an additional audit fee has been included for this work. It doesn't say how much it is.
If I could just take you through to the fee pages, it is a product.
It's in paragraph 17.
I do what you're doing and just direct them to the pack.
Yes, sorry. If I could take you through to the fee page.
I'll see it on there.
We do include
Most of that
them.
come
Is
from
it?
my dad.
It is.
It's number 31 in the main pack.
And that is a provisional fee. We do include an estimate around that. Should there be any issues as we go through our work, we will obviously report those through to committee and a fee implication there. The ISA 315 on that page is an estimate of £5,000 on page 32 of your pack.
Right, okay.
Okay, so do we have any other questions from members? No,
It's only just a quick one, if I.
Terry. Yep.
It's Appendix C, I think it is. So 65 of our pack, page 5 of yours. We've just got general inquiries and maintenance. I just wonder that question about what do we regard as key events or issues that would have significant impact on the financial statements. I was just slightly surprised that we haven't put the send issue in there in the management response to that one.
That's under increasing DSG deficit.
Oh, is it?
So yeah, so SCND just forms a third of that sort
Oh,
of
okay.
dedicated schools grant.
Okay, so we don't appear to have any other questions. Moving to the recommendation then on page 9 of the agenda pack, can I take the report as being noted and that all comments made will be captured in the minutes in the usual way? I take that as agreed. Yep, thank you. The next item is the item 10 is the risk management update. Neil Jones, head of the internal audit service, will present this item. So Neil, over to you, please.
Okay, moving over to my laptop on the.
Oh, right. Right.
Apologies for that. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chair. Just before I start, one of the people attending, Jo Snowden, is online there. So Jo, welcome. She's the person who does all the legwork to get this report going. So thank you for that. So this is the routine corporate risk register update. It's got a couple of extra little bits in terms of an emerging risk, also some progress against some risk management recommendations that the external auditor put in their value for money work last year, and also a brief update on counter fraud. So also for this committee, the appendix, which is normally just a straightforward list of updates, we thought we would take account of something a couple of years back where we said every now and then, perhaps once a year, we would bring a more detailed risk register depicting the mitigations against that risk and also where we expect the target of those to be. So just in terms of the report itself, and then we'll come on to the appendix, which is generally more where there are more questions. So paragraph 6 begins to explain any movements in the register since we last presented, which was in January. And you can see that the long-standing COVID risk has finally been downscored to be off and managed in departments. I did make reference there to the World Health Organization downscaling their scores. The Director of Public Health informed me that last week the NHS also made that risk as business as usual, which is encouraging. There's then an emerging risk starting in paragraph 7. So this explains that a long-standing arrangement for what was formerly the County Council's payroll, which transferred into the Employee Service Centre, to not only pay officers of the County Council, but then schools and academies, is coming to an end. And I've given the reasons beyond that there. There are some risks for the schools, who are our own maintained schools, who are, and academies, obviously, who are moving to a new payroll provider. There are also risks for the corporate resources department in terms of making sure that they get everything right for that transition to occur. So what we've tried to do in paragraph 10 is to list some of the mitigations there that are underway. And then paragraph 11 one of my team from the audit team is being allocated into the project to keep an eye on the controls, both centrally and also at the schools once that transition occurs. I'm still in the main report now at paragraph 12 onwards. So in January, the external auditor, Grant Thornton, brought their annual auditor's report. And in this section on governance, there were some references to some minor improvements in the authority's risk management framework, which we agreed and took account of. So they are listed in paragraph 13 in terms of progress. What the key one really, I think, is 13A1, which is about the independent and objective review. So certain members would have been around a few years back when we had the council's insurers and their risk management team to come in and do that. So we're looking to go down that route to have a completely independent review of the processes, perhaps in the autumn. The final part of the main report then is just from paragraph 14 onwards. Don't want to dwell on these too much because these are just routine updates on work that my audit team conducts as part of its counter fraud work. So that's the report. I'll gladly take any questions on the report, and then the appendix starts in a couple of pages time. I think it's about 109. So glad to take any questions, Chair.
So, Mr. Richardson.
Just a quick one, Neil. Seems funny you said next. Paragraph 8, where it says that schools and academies didn't look like the changes to that we did on payroll. What it doesn't say in the report is that one of the major reasons why they went out to re-tender and they're leaving. So did we shoot ourselves in the foot by not actually checking what schools and academies were expecting from the system before we introduced the change, and therefore have we actually caused that business to move away from us through our own actions?
Well, there probably is an element to that, because obviously we're implementing kind of a corporate system that schools kind of also feed off. So the focus is trying to keep things as vanilla as possible, because obviously the more you bespoke it, the more sort of costly the system is, the more potential for error. So there is an element of that. Although that said, there were enhancements to the system, because previously the schools were on a very sort of manual approach. So I think it was a bit of a 6 1/2 dozen over. Some of it was kind of just the fact that you changed, like say, you couldn't necessarily kind of canvas and bespoke it for them, so they did get the vanilla offering. But that said, some of the schools did get a bit better access with the light, so it was probably a bit of 6 1/2 dozen of the other. But we have found it sort of increasingly difficult to have sort of vanilla corporate platform with lots of different types of kind of customers on it. So hence that was one of the sort of key drivers for winding the service down.
Sir Richard,
Thanks for that, Declan. So coming back on that point, I've raised this a couple of times, is where does this therefore leave the viability of us providing our service for our own staff? And is it about time we actually went out to tender and outsourced it, closed this down in-house, which I suspect would save us money and cost us less overall? So is that part of the planning, that as we're losing external customers, we should now perhaps look to be tendering out our service for someone external to do for us, as most large businesses do these days?
It's a fair point. So if you look at the schools academies business, it's probably about 1/5 of EMS in total. So you're right, it's a sort of a material change. So what the plan is, this is kind of this change will happen over the sort of the course of the year, and some of the sort of changes going on as well. But the plan is to first look at the finance side of EMS and just have a bit of a value for money review, a benchmark review, to just sort of see where it does compare to the market. So to do the finance side first, mainly because it's more comparable to sort of other organisations. It's easier to do that. When we've done that, got that under the belt, the changes should have settled down on the employee side, and then do a similar sort of exercise on there. So we'll pick up what you're requesting as part of those reviews. But I mean, ironically, once the schools have gone, it does become a more comparable arrangement to other organisations. So it's easier to do those comparisons and make those choices.
Thank you. Have we got any other questions? No. All right. So moving to recommendations then, which are set out on page 14 of the agenda pack. Regarding recommendation A, the committee is asked to approve the current status of the strategic risks facing the County Council. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thanks, that's everybody.
Apologies, Chair, I didn't give you the piece of paper, unless you're moving on to
No.
recommendation B.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Yeah, we did discuss a briefing. Instead of, I know today we didn't have a risk management presentation because of the briefing that we had this morning and the training we received. In September, for the September meeting, we think it would be useful to have the authority's new insurance brokers to give a presentation because that will align then to the insurance annual report, the first insurance annual report that we'll be going through. So they will give us a flavour of the authority's insurance arrangements.
Yep. So on item B, regarding the recommendation B, a presentation by the Council's Insurance Brokers is recommended, and I propose that. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Is that agreed? Yep. With regard to recommendation C, can I take the updates on emerging risks, risk management actions and counter fraud as being duly noted? I take that as agreed. Yep. Thank you. We now move on to item 11, the provisional draft annual governance statement 22-23 as set out on pages 121 to 152 of the agenda pack. Neil Jones will present this item. Over to you, Neil.
I'm having a few difficulties with my modern glove, so just bear with me, please. So yes, again, another welcome to another member of my team on this occasion. This is Lynn Woolhouse, who again has done a lot of work in being able to get this report to this stage. So this report is how we've approached the statutory annual requirement to provide a governance statement. Once that governance statement is signed by the chief exec and leader, then it will eventually accompany, excuse me, the draft statement of accounts when they're published on the website. The report, additionally to the report this year, though, it informs the committee of some work undertaken by my internal audit service to evaluate the council and whether it's at risk of governance failings. We'll come on to that in a while. So paragraph 2 onwards explains the statutory requirements, and then going through the next few paragraphs, and it really the statutory requirement is to annually review our systems of internal control and produce a statement. Paragraphs 3 to 5 explain that pretty much officers compile the statement in accordance with well-established national framework, and that ensures that statutory requirements are met. So this necessitates ensuring that the statement not only reflects the council's own governance arrangements, but also significant partner or group entries. And then paragraph 6 explains that because of the committee timing, a provisional draft is reported now, and members will be provided with a formal draft before it is published with the draft accounts on the council's website before the end of June. So the approach, starting in paragraph 8 to 15, not too dissimilar to previous years, really. It requires directors of each department completing a range of self-assessments to ensure their conformance against our code of governance and the national framework, and then it allows for recognition of areas where they think developments may be required. Moving on to realistically, we always are transparent around this. So this paragraph 16 explains that the statement allows for reporting any what we consider to be significant governance issues. So we do have our own self-designed criteria, which are listed in paragraph 16. So the group of senior officers meets, reviews that list of criteria, and then puts forward any significant governance issues. Paragraph 17 refers back to the previous year's significant governance issues and explains there has been progress against them. And I'm aware there has been further progress, which is not in this report, but they will be included in the final draft in June. And then paragraph 18 refers to the fact that we, as a group of officers, determined there were 2 further significant governance issues, which I'm sure will be no surprise to members in terms of what is there. And then paragraph 21 on this part of the report just explains that the annual governance statement remains open until the accounts are formally signed off. If you recall, we kept them open until January time last year. And so that will continue. So any other significant changes will be added in. So that's the part on the annual governance statement. I just want to start the second part of the report really on paragraph 23 onwards. So committee was aware, members who attended this morning, about references to public interest reports and the work of Grant Thornton over the last couple of years in sort of accumulating where things had gone wrong in various organisations. So we reflected on that as an internal audit function and devised a list of all the issues and asked our senior officers, our statutory officers, to self-assess against those, which was a very useful exercise. And we have, from that, identified a list of actions which are contained as an appendix. And so those lists of actions sit on their own, but also they are linked into the development plan for the AGS. So I think that's all I've got to say on the report, Chair. Again, I'd like to take any.
Thank you, Neil. So over to committee. Mr. Walter.
Thank you. Yes. Page 142, first farm. The report's due by end of June. Is that going to be on time? Do we know?
I can't give you the detail, Mr. Bolter, because it's sensitive and confidential at the moment. So I think by the time you get the June update, there will be detail in there of how the authority is dealing with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So if we have no other questions, we'll move to the recommendations. Regarding recommendation A, can I take it that the committee notes and supports the provisional draft annual governance statement as set out in the appendix, and that all the comments made now will be taken and captured in the minutes? Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Agreed. Can I take the recommendation B, which is note that there are two significant government issues reported in the provisional draft annual governance statement? C, note that the provisional draft annual governance statement will be subject to amendments and that the final draft will be circulated to members of this committee before it is published with the draft statement of accounts before the end of June. And recommendation D, note that the provisional draft annual governance statement, which may be subject to changes as required by the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting, has been prepared in accordance with the best practice. Can I take those all as read? Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Moving to item 12, we have the internal audit progress report as set out on pages 153 to 182 of the agenda. So, Neil, over to you, please, again. It's page 153 to 158.
I've got it. Okay.
Yep.
This report contains a number of segments, really. Work we've completed up to 5th of May since we last reported. Our progress against implementing high importance recommendations. So a member briefing earlier on explained that certain recommendations that we grade to be higher importance, they stay with this committee until I'm confident that they are signed off, can be signed off. We've rolled over some work that we're already involved in currently involved in for the starting this year, and we'll be discussing those with the Director of Corporate Resources and the management team in the coming month. And then also the East Midlands Shared Service, I got their plan and a brief update on the requirements for the external quality assessment. So I'm skipping through this now. So our Appendix 1 covers our work undertaken. It's a list summary of work undertaken. It shows gradings of the work we've done. Quite a good throughput of work in that period of time, as you'd expect over 6 months. Okay. And then we also include with that in that appendix other areas where we work, provide other work, not just assurance work, but advisory work and consulting work, and then where we also help other sections. There's also some references to work we've done on counter fraud. We do not report any frauds to the committee until we're confident that they have been signed off, but they're in there too. And then also where my team has been assisting with other sort of project groups, just to bring, so the school transition payroll is one of those, and then also there's another one that's currently underway relating to financial controls. So that's all in Appendix 1. Appendix 2, sorry I haven't got the page numbers, is the sort of rollout of our high importance recommendations, and where changes have occurred, I put those in bold font. So for this period of time, there haven't been any new high importance recommendations, which is always good. Those in progress have been, a couple have been extended out. So we've given examples of those why they've been extended out, and then we've been thankfully managed to close off a couple of long-standing ones around ICT contracts and also disaster recovery. So they're all in Appendix 2. Appendix 3 just reflects on carrying forward quite a lot of work in train at the moment, so that's underway constantly. Appendix 4 is the internal audit plan of our colleagues at Nottingham City, who undertake the audit for our East Midlands Shared Service. Their head of audit did report to the November committee in terms of the work that they'd done last year. There was, at that point in time, quite a rollover of work that hadn't been done, and that's been reflected in their plan for 23-24. And then finally, at paragraph 15 onwards, I did bring to the committee in January, it's time for the 5-yearly review of the independent review of the quality of the internal audit function. I had hoped, all things given, to have been bringing something to this committee in terms of the plans and how we're progressing that. Unfortunately, that's stuttered along a little. What I have done is at least to look back at the actions and make sure they're implemented from previous years, but I'll be working on that over the summer with an intention to bring something to a very committee very soon. So I think that's, again, quite a whistle stop tour through the audit work. Second question.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Has any member got any questions? Mr. Richardson.
It's only one of my favourite themes, Mr. Chairman. I think as a council we do a great job in making our meetings accessible to the public, and we want the public to join in and communicate with us. Well, quite frankly, if I was a member of the public looking at Appendix 3, I wouldn't have the foggiest what it was.
What page is that, please?
There you go. I'll show you.
Page 180.
So would a member of the public be able to decipher what that was? I'd struggle. So I just think that we need to think about the audience for reading these reports. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to think about the audience reading these reports so we can make them truly accessible to the public and they don't feel that we're putting things in a language which is designed, and I agree it's not intentional, it's just accidental, to stop them understanding what we're discussing. So my ongoing request is, English language in English, not abbreviations, cut the acronyms, and we'll all be happy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for that. Any other questions or queries? No. So can I take the routine update report as being noted? Take that as agreed? Agreed. Yeah, thank you. So item 13 is the Internal Audit Service Annual Report for 2022-2023, starting on page 183 to 214 of the agenda pack. So Neil, again, over to you. So 183 to 214. Got it? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry for the delay. Mr. Richardson's just give me some IT skills there.
No, I have to say that is a first. I know one thing about IT, and I've just given the only bit to Neil.
He's pointed out to you how to get the outline of the reports. Yeah, well done, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. So this is my annual report, and again, it's another requirement of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, and it's a requirement to provide an annual report of the work that we've done. And then also to provide an overall opinion on the reliability of the control environment for the County Council, which is its functions of governance, risk management and control. So there are some other elements of the annual report that should be included. Nevertheless, two elements are that's the review, self-assessment review against the standards, and our quality quality improvement programme have been held back in terms of the equality assessment I was talking about earlier on. So the detailed annual report is provided in the appendix. And whilst it's not a standard requirement, we do tend to put that on the members' website anyway. So my report identifies that the opinion overall is positive. Again, we've had some areas where we've made recommendations, but they generally, mostly been accepted by managers. We had a few partial assurance ratings, but they're always going to come around, to be fair. So in today's world, it's good to be able to give another positive assurance rating. I also take account of the work of this committee and other assurance elements that I from other services that come in. So it is a positive opinion overall. As Annex 1 gives more detail on how that opinion was formed and the types of audits and the components of the control environment. And then Annex 2 is realistically a roll-up of all the lists of work that we've undertaken that the committee has seen over the year anyway. So there's not really a great deal else to say on that other than it's pleasing to provide a positive opinion that the control environment is still sound.
Thanks very much, Neil. So we have a question from Mr. Bolton. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, yes. Can you confirm you've got enough resources now to carry out your budget? We had problems in the past with staff retention and staff recruitment. It's an important service. So can we make the statement you've got enough staff or not?
I can't remember whether it's in this report or maybe the previous report, but I did comment on the resourcing situation, which is at its highest for a number of years. So we are fully staffed at the moment, and good, experienced, qualified staff as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bannister.
You. I think it's this report, and I was going to comment on the fact that you have been successful in not just the recruitment and the retention of staff, which I know in other councils has been an issue. So congratulations on that. But I also noted the comment that staff attendance has been, I think your description is very good. So congratulations. Something must be working well in the IS. So appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Declan was instrumental in helping us here. So one of the ladies is on there now in terms of going to the open market and spending a few bob, if you like, to get better, variation on people who wanted to apply. So that's what we've done, and we've done really well. Thank you.
So Mr. Richard.
It's just only a tiny picky one for the clarity of the records. I take it the first paragraph on page 190 should say Oracle, not Oracell. I've not heard of Oracell, so I assume they're a new company. I do read the reports now.
I have to say I didn't notice that. Well done, Mr. Richardson. So if we have no other questions, can I take it that the committee notes the annual report for 22-23 and agrees that a copy will be circulated to all members of the council for information. Can I take that as agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So the next item is the quarterly Treasury Management Report as set out on pages 215 to 228 of the agenda pack. Nick Walsh will present this item. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as stated, this report summarises the position as at the end of the fourth quarter of the 2022-23 financial year. Paragraph 2 to 8, they summarise what Treasury Management is and in particular the committee's responsibilities. Nothing has changed from recent reports in that, so I'm not going to go through that in detail, but it's included for completeness. Paragraphs 9 to 11 summarise the key points from Link's latest economic summary, which is attached as an appendix. Two main points just to bring out. Inflation sort of stubbornly staying above 10% in February and continue to do so in March, with food prices being kind of one of the biggest drivers. But obviously, we are seeing things like fuel prices starting to reduce. And I think the market consensus is still that it will fall back to around perhaps 4% by the end of this current year. And then in terms of growth has continued to be weak in the economy in recent months. Up until recently, there'd been an expectation in the markets that perhaps over 2023 as a whole, the economy would experience a slight contraction before growth sort of reappeared in 2024. However, I did note earlier this week that the International Monetary Fund has now predicted that there will actually be growth of 0.4% this year. So, you know, it does change, but everybody has a slightly different view on it. So moving on to the section starting on paragraph 12, the table in that paragraph summarises the position on the private debt investments. A further 0.3 million of capital has been invested in the 2017 MAC4 fund. That's returned, of the 3 million, 0.3 million of what was invested has been returned, leaving 8.2 million remaining in the fund. And that fund is valued at 8.7 million based on current market assessment. And then in terms of the MAC6 fund, there's still 1.2 million remains uncalled as at the end of the quarter. The full 10 million from the CFR5 investment was called up during the period, and also a further 0.3 million of the MAC6. I'm sorry, I've already said that bit. It's too early to have received any income from the CFR5 investments, but you'll see that the 18.8 million invested in MAC6 is now a market value of 19.3 million. And then a further 0.5 million received back from the MAC4 fund. 0.4 million of this was capital, leaving 8.5 million still invested. So yeah, that's sorry, the remaining 5 million in the CFR5 had called up. So all 15 million has now been called up. Sorry, I was getting confused with my numbers a bit there. Perhaps I'll just go back and say that again, because I've just conflated some bits. Bear with me, I've problems with my IT as well. So yeah, so on the CFR5, the remaining 5 million has now been called up. So the full 15 million of that on that fund has now been called up. Sorry, I just suggested it was only 10 million a minute ago. In terms of short-term investments, the section from paragraph 15 shows that the balance of short-term investments rose from 369 million to 426 million over that quarter. 160 million of loans, average APR of 2.75 matured, and then 226 million of new loans, an average APR of 4.45% were taken out. And then there's information also included there around the average maturity of the loans in terms of numbers of days. It has increased from 115 up to 135, reflecting the fact that the money's been kept a little bit shorter to manage the cash flow. and we've kind of got no preset payment is received in certain months in that period as well. So it's actually slightly lengthened from 115 to 135, but that's a position. It doesn't materially impact it because because we're getting new maturities in all the time, and then we're taking out new loans all the time. So a variation from 115 days to 135 days is not hugely significant. Table in paragraph 19 shows the investments outstanding at the end of the period, which are 467 million pounds, which that includes the private debt numbers as well. And then further information is included in the diagrams, which sit under paragraph 20. They show how the funding is split across the institutions geographically and also by sovereign status and by international credit rating. And what you can take from this is that the majority of the funds are in both cases are sort of sit within the top 3 highest credit rating categories. And then in terms of moving on to paragraph 22, shows that the weighted annual performance review and annual percentage rate on the investment portfolio increases from 3.19% in Q3 to 4.05% in Q4. Price achieved on these short-term investments is determined by, what the market expectations are and how interest rates will change over the loan period. And as interest rates have increased, it's been sort of harder to obtain 6 to 12 months investments in excess of base rate over that period, which is why the blue line on the graph in paragraph 22 has fallen below the orange line and has been there for a while. However, once we get to the peak of interest rates, when we get there, which obviously looks like getting pushed back a little bit now on latest predictions, that position should reverse. Paragraph 23 informs members that there are no loans that were made during the period which subsequently breached the authorised counterparty list during that period. And paragraph 25 shows that during the period the council was operated within the Treasury management and prudential indicators, and that no difficulties are envisaged as we move forward in the short term. And just finally, paragraph 26 states the over the financial year 8.6 million of interest was generated in total from all the Treasury management activity.
I know your interest rates have gone up. That's a big difference. Will that money be used to put back into services, or will it be hived away into other projects? I thought that's a little windfall that we didn't know was coming. It could be used to help some of the services which are under pressure.
It's only short-term balances that are there. It's money that will we have large cash balances, but it's all expected to be utilised. Well, all of it, large chunks of it, are expected to be utilised to fund the capital programme over the next 4 years. So what we've tried to do is to try and fund, the capital programme as early as possible to make sure that we kind of leave ourselves in a better position. And then in the meantime, whilst the money is sat there, we can continue to earn interest on it. And obviously, it's been significant interest over a period of time, but it's not money that can be freed up to deliver ongoing services. It's only kind of money that's available for one-off purposes, which is why we will direct it in the first instance to the capital programme.
Yeah, I've always had a bit of a problem with that, using revenue budget to do capital schemes, Chair. I know it's internal borrowing is perhaps saves money, but in these hard times, bit of easing for people's pressure might be beneficial rather than investing for the future. If we're not careful, the patient will die before the medicine's administered.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think what Mr. Walsh was saying is that the money is already set aside, and given the inflationary pressures there are on capital projects, it's a mere drop in the ocean towards those costs. But I will just ask, is that fair comment, Mr. Walsh?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're expecting, in order to fund the capital programme, we're going to need to, borrow a further 126 million pounds, I think, to fund the capital programme over the 4 years. So obviously, if we spend more of our money now up front, that's just going to increase that borrowing requirement to fund the capital programme. So yeah, it's you can only spend money once. So.
Thanks very much for that, Mr. Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a query in respect of the appendix, the link review, economic review, which I always find very interesting. And I'm reminded as I read through it about the failure of several US banks and the impact that it had on global equity markets, and in particular in the UK, 5% decrease in the FTSE index. Presumably, we have to have this on our radar as a potential risk in respect of investments. Will there be any more banks that will fail that will have to be sorted out, and any sort of longer term implications we should be getting a little worried about?
That risk always exists, and obviously what we do is keep a very kind of close eye on what's going on in the financial markets. Obviously very much supported by Link, our treasury management advisors, who they'll give us very regular reports on the status and credit rating of all the banks, so we can kind of see movements and track those kind of things. I'm not saying that's going to be foolproof and cover everything, but I think we do all we can to give us the best chance of being able to see what's coming further down the line. And we might well take a view that because of something we know, we might take an extra cautious approach, even over and above what Link might be recommending. You kind of see some potential warning signs. But we try and be as prudent as we possibly can, of course. Yeah, thank you.
Probably just worth adding for a bit of context that the regional banks that went bust in the US would never lend to them. And I think that in the last decade, there's over 100 US banks have gone bust. So it's kind of it's a different world, but it's almost just part of their kind of financial system. But those banks aren't subject to the same sort of regulation or capital requirements that the sort of the European banks that we tend to lend to are. So that it is a different segment of the market. But as Nick said, we do tend to top and tail what links send us. We don't even borrow to the kind of the riskier end of the prudent list that we get. So we are pretty safe. As Nick says, you can never be certain, but the US banks isn't something we'd normally touch for those regional banks.
Mr. Bannister.
If I may just briefly come back, and thank you for that, and I appreciate that. The concern seems to be that although it's the US banks and they're small banks and they're not regulated, and this authority would never touch those banks, it's still having an effect in the UK because of the impact on the FTSE and the equity markets that we're having here. And if we're investing in the equity markets as an authority, then there is an exposure of some degree, isn't there?
So we don't touch equity. All we ever do is sort of lend to sort of the banks, and it's sort of based on their sort of credit rating. So we never go into the equity. It's just a straight loan, and I suppose we've always got to be careful we're not fighting the sort of the last war, as it were. So this time around with the US banks, what really happened was a bit of a flight to quality. So where people were sort of starting to look, the money was moving away from the regional banks and putting them more into the sort of the AAA rated money market funds, which kind of helped us a bit because it created more liquidity in the areas that we were sort of holding our money. So we do have to be careful, which I guess is your point, not just look backwards at what the sort of the previous problems were, but to look ahead. But we don't touch equity investments. We only do sort of make loans.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Richardson.
I mean, just following up on Neil's point, I mean, I think it's apparent that liquidity ratios in banks, particularly across Europe, are the best they've been probably for the last 40 years. I mean, the banks that have gone bust in America, Republic and that, should have gone bust 30 years ago. Credit Suisse has been a bucket shop ever since I worked in international banking. So I don't think we want to worry the people. The bit I always find mildly amusing about this conversation is if you and I put money in the bank, it's a deposit. If we put money in the bank, it becomes a loan. It's quite mysterious, really. And I think it does confuse the public out there when we're talking about giving loans to banks when we're actually placing a deposit with them.
Absolutely. It's just the context of treasury management sort of loans and the.
Okay, so I think we can take some assurance from that. Have we got any other questions? It appears not. So can I take this report as being noted? Yep, agreed. Okay, so finally we have the annual Treasury Management Statement set out on pages 229 to 238 of the agenda pack. So Nick, if over to you again, please. We have indeed.
I apologise. Yeah, so necessary to act quite quickly, possibly within a few hours. But at the same time, it is important that we kind of do all the appropriate due diligence to ensure that there are no hidden risks of lending to the authority. And it is probably worth noting that those risks are perhaps more likely to be reputational than financial, because you're pretty much guaranteed to get your money back from another local authority. The checklist, which we've attached as an appendix to this report, just sort of highlights the kind of various information that we'll look at prior to any loan being made. And pulling this information together may well see some opportunities missed, but probably the balance needs to be on the side of caution from that reputational point of view. And as such, the checklist is likely to be refined going forwards to ensure it focuses on the most relevant areas, and when we can potentially sort of streamline it and you know, get to a point where we can make a decision a little bit quicker. Moving on to paragraph 9 and 10, there was one retrospective breach of the counterparty list, which related to Goldman Sachs way back at the start of the financial year. And what that was that the lending duration for Goldman Sachs was reduced to 100 days at a point in time when we had a 6 month, we had 6 months loans out with them of £30 million. Obviously, the committee was notified that at the time as part of the Q1 update. Paragraphs 11 to 15 reflect on the unusual, at least in recent years, financial climate in which treasury management activity was undertaken in the last year. The combination of significant rises in interest rates coupled with that, some well publicised failures of some banks, which obviously we just referred to. But as Declan's kind of confirmed, none of the banking failures in any way led to any impact on the council's funds or investments. Moving on to the debt position, which starts paragraph 16. No new loans were taken out during the period, and only 0.5 million was repaid. And that's because punitive penalty payments have meant that early repayment of debt hasn't been worth considering. Now, I say that, but with interest rates continuing to rise, and combined with the sort of impact of wider financial issues, and it will be interesting to see whether the US government have managed to sort out access to additional cash and or whether they're going to run out of money. But that's kind of a key factor going forwards, or not going forwards, over perhaps in the very short term. We are at the moment giving some sort of serious consideration as to whether actually some early repayment could be undertaken. This involves, taking an assessment of how interest rates would change over the lifetime of the current long-term loans, and then sort of comparing the cash flows of that, of allowing the loan to run, to run as it planned. But sort of a long-term assessment of interest rates like that is quite challenging. So there's always going to be a degree of uncertainty as to whether it's the right time to go or not. But the way that the markets are going and the prepayment interest rates are kind of increasing, it's looking like a possibility. So we're going to have a look at that next week, depending on what happens over the weekend. The table in paragraph 17 shows the 0.5 million movement that I explained. There are two categories: one where interest rates is fixed, and the other where the lender can up the rate. But at the point that they up the rate, we'd always have the opportunity to repay without penalty. And what you can see is that overall debt portfolio, 262.6 million, average interest rate of 5.84%. And then paragraph 18 refers to the shortfall on the 23-27 capital programme of 124 million. Sorry, I think I said 126 million earlier in response to Mr. Bolter's question. And that's down from 143 million that it was at this point last year. And, it's expected that the council's buoyant balance sheet will help us to fund this from internal balances. And so we're not necessarily expecting any external loans to be required. But the downside of that is obviously those less buoyant cash balances mean that we'll get much lower levels of returns on our short-term investments going forwards, especially if it's coupled with a falling away of interest rates, which perhaps may not happen so much in this financial year, but will have impact potentially the year after. So yeah, moving on to debt transactions, talks about the most historic, the historic borrowing position, and references the fact that at the start of the year, the council's position was over borrowed by 49 million. And over borrowed, as we were talking about earlier, is perhaps a slight misnomer, because it doesn't mean that we've borrowed more than we should. It just means we've borrowed more historically than we currently need to fund our kind of capital outlay. It rose to 54 million by the end of the year, and the situation just comes back to that, the punitive early repayment rates, which meant we haven't been able to kind of adjust the position. But that 124 million on the capital programme, the shortfall on it, means that we would expect to get moved from an over borrowed to an under borrowed position by the end of this current MTFS. And getting towards the end now, you'll be pleased to know. Moving on to the section on investments from paragraph 727, you'll see that the average return for the financial year was 2.29%, compared to the average Bank of England rate of 2.3% and the average overnight rate of 2.26%. And that compared with an average return of 0.62% over the last 5 years, where interest rates obviously have been much more subdued. And it's worth noting that the loan portfolio has outperformed average base rate over this 5-year period to an extent, and it's obviously a very difficult calculation, this, but probably an estimated 2.5 million of additional returns have been received over that period. and that differential. Paragraph 27 points to an appendix that has in the past been added to this report relating to links benchmarking analysis, but it's not produced until the end of May, so we haven't got it yet. But it will be circulated to all members when available, which shouldn't be too far away. I mean, it is possible to make some comparisons, and based on the position at December 21, we had a weighted average return for the council of 2.16% against the average for its benchmark group of only 1.76%, and the average for all county councils of 1.79%, which kind of gives an indication that actual performance has compared pretty well with our peers this year. And it's worth noting that last year's weighted average return for the council was only 0.25%. But again, that's just reflective of the fact that interest rates have gone up over this year. That was all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. So has anybody got any questions on the annual Treasury Management Statement? No? I think we explored it fairly deeply this morning already. Can I take the annual report, which is being considered by the Cabinet in June, as noted? I take that as agreed. Thank you. So the date of the next meetings and future meetings, the next meeting of this committee will be on the 22nd of September 2023, and thereafter the meetings are as outlined on the agenda there. Actually, the next meeting is, right, I see in the schedule it actually says 27th of February 2023, which I think is correct rather than 22nd. Is that correct, June? Is it 27th?
I think they should say 24, so it should be 26th of January 2024, 24th of May 2024, etc.
But 27th of September 2020. Oh, so we have got a couple of meetings. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. Right. So can I take those dates as being agreed? Yep. Okay. So the last item we have now, we're going to move to the urgent item, dispensation for non-attendance. A copy of this report has been circulated to all members of the committee and has been published on the council website. Lauren, over to you to present this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee. This report relates to a request for dispensation arising as a result of likely non-attendance by a member. I set out at paragraphs 4 to 7 of the report the legal issues arising if a member fails to attend a meeting, and as members will see, that entails an automatic vacation of office after a period of 6 months, and it's not possible to remedy that by subsequent attendance at a meeting. The Local Government Act 1972 gives power to the council to grant dispensation to a member who is unable to attend for 6 months, and the council has delegated that function to this committee. The reasons for the request are set out at paragraph 8, and they relate to the caring responsibilities of Mrs. Bolter for a member of her family and the impact of that upon her availability and her own health and well-being to attend meetings. I've outlined 3 options available to the committee, and the committee is invited to consider those options and indicate which it prefers to take forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so you have the outline of what's indicated there. We have the option either to not grant dispensation, grant dispensation for a limited amount of time. So any queries or comments or questions? Mr. Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm deeply sympathetic to Mrs. Broadley's position, but I do seek a little bit of further clarification, because it's my understanding that Mrs. Broadley was able to stand for election to the Oadby and Wigston Borough Council in the May election. She was elected and presumably have signed her declaration of office. And I've heard anecdotally that she was able to attend the annual council meeting at Oadby and Wigston. If that is the case, and she appears to be fit to be able to and have the time to be able to campaign and be elected and attend council meetings, it may be that she does have the ability to attend at least one meeting of this authority before the 22nd of August. But I look forward to receiving further clarification on that point.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't aware of that until today. And yes, that does seem to change the complexion of things. Lauren.
So I should add that I haven't made any inquiries in relation to that. I accept the request that's made to me at face value and present it to the committee. I haven't inquired beyond that.
Okay, perhaps we could seek some clarification on that. And
Can I clarify something, Chair?
yeah,
Mrs. Broadley is unable to come to daytime meetings. because of
right.
Sharing commitments. She does her work in an afternoon, late afternoon and evening, so she can carry out her duties, but she can't physically get here in the daytime at the present time. So able to do the work, yes, but not attend the meetings here, because Oadby and Wigston meetings are in the evening. So that's a different matter. That's the
going forward over the next 2 years, do you feel she will be able to attend any meetings for council at all during the daytime?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
So to extend it till the end of September would give her the opportunity to arrange
Well,
to attend.
I would personally like to move option 2 for 6 months.
Right.
Given fair, I mean, this is what we do to normal staff, isn't it?
It is.
It's not
It is.
unusual to do this for staff members.
No, it isn't in difficult circumstances. Has anybody else got any points they'd like to raise? What does the committee feel? Do you think we need to do it for 6 months, or should we look at it again in September?
I'm getting slightly confused here, Mr. Chairman. I understand what's being said, but one would have thought if someone has stood for an election and has had time to campaign, some of which must have been during the daytime, to actually acquire office somewhere else and actually receive additional allowances, but not then feel able to fulfil their duties on behalf of the residents here for which they are receiving allowance, it does seem rather strange. Now, I do understand that under our expenses regulations, people are allowed to claim expenses for obtaining care during the day for people where they need to, and therefore to be able to attend, if nothing else, but 5 council meetings a year doesn't seem unreasonable. There's no explanation as to why the 5th of July would be impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it quite strange that if someone's got that responsibility, which is making the meal, which is what it says in paragraph 8, why they would then take on further responsibilities at an additional council, which could actually cause more concern and issues for them, which might preclude them from actually coming to represent here. So, you know, had I not been, I mean, on face value, I was happy to go with this until I understood from what's just been said that this person has felt able to go out campaign. It is clear her husband, I assume, has also been elected as a councillor at Oadby and Wigston. So presumably there are 2 people in the household who could do caring arrangements. And therefore, I just don't understand the report because I don't think we've got the whole story. And I find it very difficult to make a subjective judgment based on the information we have with the latest evidence that just come forward.
Okay, well, just for clarification purposes, I would suggest we go to the end of September so we grant dispensation till the end of September so we can actually clarify things. Lauren.
Can I just add for completeness, the reasons set out at paragraph 8 have been shared with Mrs. Broadley and confirmed as accurate. What I haven't done is gone and asked her more about it. I didn't feel that was appropriate for me to do so.
No, understand.
So I want the committee to understand that is an agreed position so far as Mrs. Broadley is concerned.
Absolutely. But I think in the circumstances where Mr. Broadley, who is being cared for, has stood for election, and so has Mrs. Broadley. So I do think we do need to have some clarification. I would, in the interest of clarification of being reasonable and not unfair, I think that we should grant dispensation till the end of September. And then if need be, we can reconsider it in the light of further information on the 22nd of September. I would propose that. Can I have a second?
Second that, Jim.
All those in favour? Okay, that's everybody. So
No, it's
dispensation.
not.
Sorry,
No, it's not.
you're not.
I'm not happy with that at all, no.
Okay.
We're treating a member of the authority different to would do a normal employed member of the council. And our policy is quite clear. Members are treated the same as all the employees of the council.
Yeah.
Yes, Mrs. Want to
Lauren.
disagree with that?
I wasn't not to disagree with it. I don't know that the council's got a policy as such in relation to this scenario. I mean, members of staff can take career breaks. There are sort of flexible working arrangements for staff members, but there isn't anything sort of, I think, that compares exactly to this scenario. But I mean, you know, so a career break is generally unpaid. I think I think I've set out in the report the sort of caring duties, if you like, that the council has, and how it does wish to support staff in this, you know, who have caring responsibilities. But I don't think there's anything explicit about how that's managed.
Okay, so I take Mr. Richardson.
Can I just add in response to Mr. Bolter's point? I mean, the legal definition of a councillor is that we are actually self-employed. We are only employees for tax purposes. So all councillors are self-employed and therefore manage their own diary and their own responsibility. It is only because government passed legislation that we are liable for PAYE that we are employees for the sake of tax.
So, look, committee has voted to extend it until the 30th September, and I think clarification will be sought, and it can be brought back again in the light of clarification, if need be, to corporate governance on the 22nd of September, I think it is, which is when the next meeting is. So, it's agreed by everybody. Do you want to vote against that, Mr. Bull? So, all in favour apart from one who is against. So that is it. So that's the end of today's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you.